This is Talking Hardcore, the podcast for people who love hardcore history.
You study history because it allows us to understand the present and prepare for the future.
I'm not trolling.
And I love it.
I'm
I'm here
just
for
pointing out where they're wrong.
The Talking Hardcore podcast is presented by Ace Industrial Solutions. Are you in need of skilled trade professionals for your next project? Look no further. Specializing in commercial and industrial buildouts, floor coatings and coverings, high-speed concrete polish, floor cleaning, shot blasting, painting, energy efficiency, and pallet racking. With a proven track record of excellence, they have become the industry leader. To find out more, please check the link in the description.
You're watching Talking Hardcore. This is a special interview we are doing with the, first of all, my name's George.
I'm Scott.
And with us today is Josh. Go ahead and introduce yourself, Josh. Tell us about your page.
Hi, my name is Josh Dwyer, and I run Nothing Is Going to Get Better. It's an anti-capitalist, pro-socialist, pro-communist page on Facebook. And I'm also on pretty much every other platform like TikTok and YouTube and Twitter, all that.
Okay. And so if you're not following along, last week we released a video where Scott pointed out some of the things that, because he follows this page, and Scott pointed out some of the things that he finds to not be true about communism and socialism based on looking at your Facebook page. And then we sent that to you, and you said, Josh said, hey, why don't I come on and we'll have a discussion? I think you don't understand where I'm coming from on a few things. And we said, great. Discourse is always better than no discourse.
Absolutely.
That's how the system's supposed to work, right?
Right. Okay. So, Josh, you saw our podcast last week.
Yeah.
What did you object to that we said that you think we were wrong on?
Well, there's a few things. I mean, typically when we're talking about communism, the first thing that people think about is Russia, right?
Yep.
It's the first thing that comes to mind because they were sort of the biggest communist state, and we had the Cold War with them for 70 years. So whenever you talk about communism, people automatically associate that with Soviet-style Russian communism. But something to keep in mind is just that communism is sort of just as diversified as capitalism is. So when we're talking about, a free market in one country may be vastly different from what they consider to be a free market in another country. And the same thing sort of works with socialism and communism, in that I would say that how Cuba runs their country is different from how China runs their country, which is different from how Russia runs their country. And I would just avoid the idea that we're branching everything in there together as if it's all sort of one monolithic thing when it's not just one thing.
You want to break communism down to the underlying idea behind it then?
What it was supposed to be.
Yeah. So the idea basically starts off, Karl Marx's idea is just a stateless, classless society where there is no overhanging government that is holding everyone back and that is essentially governing the, pollitt body. So
my question is, do you think that's something that is actually possible?
Absolutely. Yeah, I definitely do. I just think that where we are right now, it's not as though we can just flip a switch and we're going to go from capitalism to communism and we're going to be, just fine, perfect as it is. That's not the way it works. For me, when I'm trying to explain to people what it is that, we should be working toward, is that we have to have an idea of what we envision to be a perfect society, right? When we're talking about what we have for goals for the future or goals for our children, the kind of society that we want to build, we have to think about what is the idea of a perfect society. And for me, the idea of a perfect society is something that goes along the anarcho-communistic line where there is no centralized government and everyone is participating in society just due to their own free will. So they're participating in making sure that pretty much everyone has what everyone needs. The basics of society are taken care of just because that's something that needs to happen rather than an individualized motive as to say that, you need to make capital and that's why you're doing it.
So hold on, George. So my question would be, on a governmental body, like who would represent the country then? Like who would be at the UN? Who would be dictating or at least pushing the country down a certain path? I mean, it sounds like...
It would...
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
So it sounds like what you're describing is more of like a small commune type of
Approach.
of approach. But the problem is, if you have 300 and let's say 330 million people, how do
Mhm.
you
Scale it.
scale it and organize? Yeah, George, how do you scale it and organize the population? And then you still have to have some type of representation at the global level. So how would that work? I mean, do you go back to democracy where somebody gets voted in place, or do you how would that work? I guess
No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't go the democratic route necessarily, as far as having a representative body, sort of like we have with the legislature right now. The way I would envision it is to say, all right, what can we do that would be as minimalist as possible with as little intervention? Because, like, if you read like State and Revolution from Vladimir Lenin, if you read those texts, it's sort of about avoiding the idea of creating classes. So if you have something like a representative democracy, then you're still separating people into classes and saying that people who are in the representative democracy, they get to make decisions, and then you get ultimately into corruption very quickly. So when we're
So
talking about scaling,
go
go ahead.
No, finish answering the question. I'm
no,
sorry. Go
yeah,
ahead.
Yeah,
sorry, he was continuing. Go ahead.
It's okay. When we're talking
Yeah.
about scaling, so the first thought that you have to have is making sure that people at the community level are able to interact with each other and sort of get that down pat. And once you have a smaller community organized, then you sort of branch out from there to be able to say that we're going to scale up to certain amounts. But I would say that it wouldn't be the way I would envision it is that it wouldn't be something like, in a perfect society, that there wouldn't be national borders. There wouldn't be things like, all right, well, this is the United States, and this is what they have to represent their interests over these people that are over in, Africa or Asia or Europe or whatever. It would just be something that is, everyone is equal, everyone is able to represent their own interests, and everyone is able to voice their own opinion, and sort of you have to start small in order to be able to say what the bigger part would look like.
Okay. So a couple of things there that you said that I think we should unpack. You talked about we should try to envision society as what would be the perfect thing, right? You
Yeah.
said something basically. I don't see how that would actually work because humans aren't perfect. So really, to me, what we should have, our societies need to be built where we make the best thing that actually is workable, that is practical, that also takes into account that some people are going to be evil, right? And if we don't have a system with checks and balances, because we don't have any system, how are you not just vulnerable to the evil guy taking over?
Well, I would say for something like that, the responsibility of removing the so-called evil person from the society would be the responsibility of where he is in his community to start with. So if I was in, my town and there's 10,000 people, let's say, whatever it is, and one person decides that he wants to start a totalitarian society, right? He wants to start and become, the king or the ruler or whatever the case is, then it is the responsibility of the people in that area to shut him down, to
but it doesn't
essentially
work
prevent
like
that
that.
from happening.
But it doesn't work like that.
Oh, wait a minute. Let's from a historical context, we can look at Adolf Hitler and the brown coats. Brown coats?
Yeah.
Yeah. Just making sure I had that historically correct. So, I mean, at first, he was not taken seriously, and slowly but surely, he garnered more control, more power, more followers, to the point where he was able to be elected and win as dictator of Germany.
Mhm.
So if once again, so if you have your small commune of, let's just say, community of 10,000 people, what's going to stop this guy from gaining 100, 1,000 followers? Maybe violent or suppressive, to get the other 9,000 to follow his lead, or at least march to the same tune. And then it spreads from there.
I mean, historically, that's what's happened, right?
Yeah,
that's I think that
Mhm.
you could argue that that is literally how we are wired genetically from evolution.
I
If
would
you look at
disagree with
this,
that.
but the same thing it happens in chimps, right? There's an alpha that's in
Mhm.
charge until he gets usurped. And if you look at all of our tribes and everything going, I mean, back to as far as we can tell, even hunter-gatherer tribes, there are the elders that make the decisions. There is a natural amount of follow and leading that is built into our social structure that evolution created.
I think there's a natural predisposition for some people to want to have a leadership role. I agree with that. But I think the idea that we should be aware and especially catering to the negative aspects of human behavior as to, that being what is natural, I think that that's a big folly, because what we're saying there is that we need to organize society to always cater to this thing instead
Oh,
of
I don't
saying
think
that,
it's cater. I think
well,
it's
it is.
protect against as much as it is. I mean, if you look at America, right?
Mhm.
The Constitution, the founding fathers, the idea is you're going to have a percentage of those people in society no matter what you do. So we build checks and balances to limit the amount of damage they can do and empower the most amount of people to have a say in the government as possible, so that we restrict, we minimize the harms, because that's really what the system that works the best, I think, does is it minimizes the harms and lets things get better gradually. That seems to be the best way to actually have progress.
I would disagree with that only because we have, just like you said, historical basis to show that virtually every leader of every country around the world has done something horrific, has done something that is, you know, well beyond what Hitler has done. I mean, even if you look at the
No,
United States, hold on, even if you look at the United States and say that just the founding fathers and their role in slavery is,
yeah, but that's
that was
not
hundreds
well
of years.
beyond what Hitler's done, right? Because if you look at the founding fathers, what they did is something that humans have always done. Slavery is bad, but what they were doing is something that literally has been part of human nature, as far as we know, forever.
And still happens today, by
But
the way.
Yes,
Hitler,
that's my point.
what
Yeah.
Hitler did was worse, just in their own time frame, worse, because
No.
people at the time, much higher percentage of the people knew that it was more abhorrent, that it was abhorrent. Whereas at the time, slavery, there was people who knew it was abhorrent, but the majority of people didn't, and it was a culture thing. Whereas Hitler was starting a new culture of genocide,
I
similar
think
to
that that
Stalin.
is I think that that is a very cherry picked way to look at it, just because if you look at our government, how it functions right now, I mean, how many slaves are existing under our capitalist model right now? There are literally millions upon millions of people that are working in sweatshops that don't make any money in China. There was a study that came out 2 years ago that said that there was 88 global brands that were operating in China that were
Sure.
having slave labor. Right?
Yep.
There are
But
people
that's
that are in cobalt mines in Africa. There are people
yep.
that are slaves on plantations in South America and in Africa.
Yep.
All of this system, it has been subjugating millions of people for hundreds of years.
Well,
As if we're talking about scale and the ability of the class system to oppress people, then we have to look at the entire picture and not just say, well, how do we stop
okay.
Hitler from happening, when it's relatively easy to stop a Hitler from happening in comparison to, because there aren't that many Hitlers.
Dude,
But
but
Well,
to say that,
that took millions of lives,
yes,
literally
and how many millions are
30
dying
millions
right
of
now?
lives.
from okay. So let me unpack one thing that I wanted to bring up. The places you spoke of China. Okay, so
Mhm.
communist China. That's why they have sweatshops, because basically you have a peasant class under communism, and you do, because I've been there. You have a peasant class where people are just trying to live their lives and succeed. So they'll take people from the farm country and bring them into manufacturing plants, and these people live, eat, sleep, and die there.
Mhm.
So um,
But you're blaming the capitalists when
for
it's not a capitalist system doing that.
Yes, it is.
but,
Because first of all,
well,
It's a
who is China
bastardized
selling to?
capitalist system. Yeah,
Hold
it
but
on, hold
doesn't
on, hold
matter
on.
who they're.
but
Let
we're
me
not
get
at
this out.
fault
All
for
right.
what they're
Hold
doing.
on, go ahead.
China is, first of all, just one country where this is happening. The entire continent of Africa is being abused, and every single state that exists in that continent is capitalist. Every single country that exists in Southeast Asia is capitalist, and this is happening there. Every single country, well, not every single country in South America. There's a few that are communist, but almost every other
Socialist,
country.
too.
So, like Brazil is a very famous, user of slave labor, and they are capitalist. If you're looking at the system, the capitalist version that we have right now is doing all the things that you're afraid that communism would do.
Well,
Well,
communism has done every time it's been tried. Not what it would do.
But
I'm
what-
saying what it literally has done. Now, whether or not you think you got a system that doesn't, you can't point to a time when communism has actually been working.
But
In a
communism
place,
has
name
worked.
a place where.
In every country it's been tried, they've had marked. I mean, if you even look at countries like Russia, countries like China, countries like Cuba, these were third world countries before the communist regimes took over. You can
And
say
they
everything
killed
you
30
want.
to
Hold on.
60 million people to get out of that. Do you not believe those numbers? Do you not
No.
believe
The numbers
what
are
Stalin
real.
did?
What I'm trying to tell you, what I'm trying to explain to you is that these countries existed, if you're taking them in the context of where they existed. If the Communist Party didn't take over in Russia or in China or in Cuba or anywhere else, those countries would still be third world nations that are being completely taken advantage of by capitalism. If
Well, I
they
don't-
didn't have a communist dictatorship come in, there wouldn't be any hospitals, there wouldn't be schools, there wouldn't be roads, there wouldn't be any of the infrastructure that these people need to actually survive.
I
All
don't
of
think
their
that's
produce
true.
would be taken by capitalist countries. All of their sugar, all of the things that they produce would just be taken by capitalist countries because
I don't
that's how
think
they
you-
function.
I don't think you have a good concept of that, though, because if you look at like starvation's never been lower in the world than it is right now. There's never been less people in the world starving than right now. And the only places where people are starving is because of political reasons. It's when
because
there's
of
some
capitalism.
warlord. No, it's political reasons where some warlord stopping the food from getting to the poor people. That's the only
Why are
places
there
that you're
poor
getting
people?
starvation. Because there's always going to be, there's always is. You can't point to a time where there wasn't poor people.
I can
It's
point
just
to
human
the
nature.
hundreds of trillions of dollars that have been pulled out of these countries. Africa is a resource-rich continent, and it would be today if Europe hadn't taken all of their shit. If
Well,
they
it's
hadn't
still-
taken all of their resources, there wouldn't be poor people there.
but it's still
No,
is
that's not
re-
true.
It's still
They'd still have poor people. The people in charge would be rich, and the rest of the people would be poor, just like they were before, and just like they are everywhere in human
They are-
history.
The
Why do you
history,
think
the historical
Africa-
context that you're sharing, the past 400 years of Europe being involved in Africa has
Right.
just been Europe taking everything out of there.
So go
Europe
further
taking
back.
everything out of India. Europe taking
Were there
everything
not
out of
poor
Southeast
people
Asia.
in Africa? But were there not poor people in Africa before the 400, 500 years ago?
I would
course
say
there
that
were.
they weren't
course there were.
poor. They were just native.
They were getting sold when they lost a war. I mean,
Who
that
are they
seems
being
poor.
sold to?
But
Yeah,
that's
but
the
who
thing.
was selling them?
Yes, that's my point. Is that's a
Other
part of the capitalist
capitalists,
infrastructure.
but other rulers that were in charge, right?
That were
People who
capitalists.
conquered them. Conquerors sold them.
So
Right.
Capitalists sold them.
Conquerors.
some background,
Conquerors.
Josh, is when African tribes would war. Can you agree with this part? When African tribes would war, when they took prisoners or wounded that weren't grievously wounded that were going to pass away, they would take those people. The winning faction or the winning tribe would take those people and they would be slaves in their villages. Do you
Yes.
agree with that sentiment? So,
Yep.
from my understanding, those winning tribes would then sell their slaves to Europeans.
Yes.
Or the Islamic people.
Or Islamic people. Or
There was as many slaves that went to the Middle East as went to the Atlantic slave trade.
but and
Yeah.
we're not.
But they were all castrated.
So and I'm not talking about just slavery in Africa, because you can look at the Russians. The Russians were slaves longer than anybody else probably in history. So it's not like it's a color based thing. It's more like this is a mode of
Work.
it's a mode of getting work done without having to do it yourself.
Well, it's a mode of exploitation.
But you can probably agree though that under the Russian when Russians served as slaves, they weren't slaves to some foreign body. They were slaves at home.
Mhm.
A lot
So
of times, yeah.
so a lot of times they were slaves at home. So what system was that? That wasn't capitalism.
What
I
I
would
think
say,
what sorry, go ahead.
okay. I would say that there's going to be instances of people that become slaves just because of, historical context. You can always say
Sure.
that.
Sure.
But what we're talking about right now is the way that the current system works. So our
So
current system employs slaves. Nestle, as I talked about on my page before, I don't know if you guys happen to see this, but Nestle and the Mars Corporation were brought before the Supreme Court 2 years ago to talk about their use of slave labor because they were having slaves as a part of their supply chain. And they tried to argue that it shouldn't be their responsibility to even talk about this because the U.S. shouldn't have any jurisdiction in Africa. And they won that case, so they continue to use slave labor right now to get
Right.
cocoa.
sure.
So there are
So
slaves that are
what
being
you're doing
employed under this system now.
so what you're doing is good because you're raising awareness of that. Because then as more people here become aware of that, that will actually hurt their bottom line and they'll stop doing it because
I
that's
think
how
that's
the
an
market
illusion.
can work. Well, maybe, but I mean it can happen. It needs to happen more for
Well,
sure. But what you
who is
don't have a situation where you can point to is a way where people aren't exploited. Because you can't point to a single time in history
No.
where communists were making the decisions and weren't exploiting people.
Well, I would say that the communist experiments that happened in those countries were an effort to try and make things more equitable. But of
Yep.
course, as
I disagree.
humans are wont to do, things didn't always line up. Of course, Russia,
Uh,
Holodomor, we all know about the different atrocities that happened under these regimes.
but then you're
But
making our
what we're
point
talking
against.
about,
But you're
but what we're
making our
talking
point
about,
against
Hold on a
sorry.
communism.
second. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
Yeah.
No, you go ahead.
So well, hold on.
No,
Yes.
let him finish.
Okay.
Let
Go
him
ahead,
finish.
Josh.
Sorry, I know it's
Go
hard
ahead.
to balance three
No,
people.
no,
No,
it's three
no
people. Yeah,
worries.
go ahead.
Yeah.
But when we're talking about how things work, how things run, what I'm talking about isn't going to be following some stock model that, Russia followed. I don't support the idea of gulags. I don't support the idea of,
Sure.
the Holodomor. I don't support any of these things. What I'm trying to
Right.
say is that when I'm looking at the way I want society to work as a perfect running society, the thing that I know for sure won't lead us there is a capitalistic model, because there's no way that having the majority of people work and give the surplus value of their labor up to a smaller and smaller group of people, there's no possible way for utopia to exist under those conditions. So if
But
I'm looking forward and saying what it is that I want from society, I know that there are things that I have to change, and capitalism can never be a part of it.
see, now I think what you're doing there is you're negating all of the good things that capitalism has done and forgetting all the benefits that capitalism has had while only looking at the negatives. But what you just mentioned there about a utopia society, that's just not possible. It never will be possible.
I think
A utopia is not possible.
to
It's just
expand
it
on
can't
George,
work.
the reason why, and I think to clarify what George is saying, is the reason why it's not possible is the same reason why you have warlords in Africa, or the same reason why you have Maoist China or Stalinist Russia, is because you have one person that
No, because of human nature.
because of human nature. But that's how it works. One
There is
person.
incentives for humans to try to be the one in charge, and that's so you can have better mates, so you can
If
provide
we
for your kids. You're talking about rewriting our DNA. Okay,
no,
our whole social structure is dependent on there are going to be individuals in every society that are driven to be the best so they can have access to the best females, have access to the best resources for their children. That's how evolution bred, or that's the evolutionary forces that work on every human, right? That's why we are the way we are. That's why we have hierarchies in the first place, right? They're naturally occurring in nature because they occur in other primates. So why would we be able to get rid of them? You're thinking that we can rewrite our DNA, basically wash away millions of years of evolution and make a better system that doesn't involve sexual selection, right? I mean, that's how women are going to pick the best mates. So how are guys not going to try harder to be the best mate? Like,
I think the way that you're viewing it is sort of endemic of the problem. The way you're looking at it as a competition for resources is the critical
right.
part that you're like failing. It's the reason why you're on the opposite side for me. So
Okay.
where we're coming from is you need to change the way that you're looking at society. All
But
right.
it doesn't, but
If you
not
had,
just
hold
me,
on.
1 second, but not just me, everybody.
Yes. Well,
For
when I
this to
say
work,
you, I mean
you mean
humans.
7 billion people need to
Yes.
change the way they look at everything.
Need to change the way that they look at resources. So
Not
the
just
way that you're
resources,
looking at it, hold on, the way that they're
everything.
looking at it, if I was just to repeat what you said there, you said that humans will always be in a competitive state because they're looking at who is the best woman or who is the, what is the best place to live or things like that. If you eliminate the idea that a woman is a thing for you to get, then you are now taking that idea out of the system. You're now saying, well, wait a second, a woman is a human being, and if I don't get this woman, that's okay. I'll find another woman.
What I
And
No,
if
think
you
I
have everything that is the basic needs, the basic necessities taken care of, you don't have to constantly think about being in competition with someone to get the thing that you need because the
y-
thing that you need is already taken care of.
no.
well,
But what you're saying is true for a lot of people. Yes. But there is going to be men, especially, that it's just not, you're going to have to kill them. The only way you'll be able to actually do what you're saying is if we have some kind of genetic test for hyper competitive people and then we whack them before they have a chance to grow up. It's the only
No,
way. It
no.
is. It's the only
The
way.
No, because
but
the way
well,
that you're viewing things is from a myopic lens that only looks at it from where you're sitting. So
No,
well,
if we had this conversation, 1,000 years ago, I'm sure you'd be sitting there telling me, "Well, Josh, we'll never be able to get rid of slavery. That's just something that's a part of society. We've had it forever." You're talking to me from a standpoint of saying what your limitations are in this moment, and you're making the mistake of saying that that is a limitation of human beings
well,
forever. And
well,
if
that's
we're
for
not what I'm
looking
Vince,
at
saying,
well,
though.
if we're looking
to
at to improve society, then we always have to ask ourselves, how can we be better? And if we just sit back and say, well, that's just human nature, I guess we're going to have
well,
slaves, then
hold
we're
on,
No,
never going to
hold
be
on.
able to
no, let
get
me answer
beyond
Yeah,
that.
where we are.
But I agree with you. Okay. I agree with you. We should always be asking that. How can we do better? And how can we get better? Okay.
Mhm.
But we also need to understand what makes us who we are to understand that. Okay. Every species on the planet is formed by evolution, right? Every species on the planet.
Mhm.
It's social. When you have a social creature like humans or wolves or anything like that, or other primates, their very social structures are formed by evolution. So what you're trying to do is rewrite and culturally you can have a lot. Okay, you can do a lot to change humans culturally. I do agree with that, but you do have to kill a lot of people to be able to do that correctly. I just don't see any way where you could make it work without doing that.
well,
And I think that's what Stalin and Lenin ended up figuring out is that, hey, if this is going to work, we're going to have to break a lot of eggs.
well, because Stalin was hyper competitive.
Well, I mean, no, I mean,
He was 100% and
right,
ruthless.
right. But if you're going to make that model work,
Yep.
you have to be willing to be merciless.
But then who's going to be in charge? See, this is the point I'm trying to make, Josh. So once again, once our small community grows and becomes a country, um, who's in charge? And if you get invaded, who's going to take control of the society? Who's going to represent your country on the global stage? Like there has to be a hierarchy. There's no way. I mean, who are you just going to pick? The guy that runs your 10,000 people town. I mean, so is there is there a guy that runs the town? Is there a guy that runs the state? You get what I'm saying? Like there
I
has to
understand
be.
what you're saying, but what I'm trying to get across to you is the idea that hierarchy is not a necessity. So when
Well,
we're looking at the way, again, if I'm talking about a perfect communist society, that's not something that's going to happen with a flip of a switch.
well,
And part of the issue of governance is running into each issue and taking them as they come. And
Okay.
until we're able to actually run a communist society, you wouldn't be able to anticipate every single thing that comes up.
Well,
What I
yeah,
would
but
say is that the way that you would run it is similar to the way that the Soviets did it with the idea of a Soviet. So for people who are listening
sure.
who may not know, a Soviet is a governing body that is the legislative, judicial, and executive branches all rolled into one. So you choose who is going to represent you based on these, however many people. So if you want to say 1,000, 10,000, whatever, you have these people who are a part of the Soviet that represent this amount of working class people. And then you have them essentially gather together. But for me personally, I don't see that as an end goal, more as something that's something that needs to happen in between, just because
But
we
how do
don't
you
have.
get from there to the end? Because what happens in practice is that middle stage
Mhm.
gets corrupt, and it always happens.
But it always happens everywhere, under every society.
Yes, but then
Correct.
how do you get to the utopia
You get
without
to the first.
corruption? How do you get there without because what you just talked about, what happened with the Soviets, right? Those
Mhm.
Politburo class became the only people with stuff. His wife will tell you that, right?
Mhm.
The people who are party members that are in charge have all the stuff, and then the people who are the communist people
Yeah.
don't have anything.
So
How
Yeah,
do you
which
get
is
past that stage?
which is very different from the way things are right now, right?
It's worse because at least here you can
I
move
would,
up. You don't have to. You have freedoms here. Like
I would,
you have the ability to say right now that you think capitalism is bad and you like communism. In the
Mhm.
in the Soviet era, you wouldn't be able to say communism is bad. I want capitalism.
so
You
can I
wouldn't have
but the
that freedom.
idea,
get
You're underselling how important
can I,
freedom is.
but
but I'm
let
not
me
saying that. What I'm saying is total freedom. The
but
position that I'm in is a position that says that there's no state, there's no class,
Okay.
there's no nobody. All right.
Okay, so
My
how do you get
position,
to that? How do you get to that from the last part you just said? So the
I'm
Soviets,
not there.
where you
No
have that,
one is
yeah.
there.
No, but
but how
no.
do
But
you get there?
I'm asking practically in your head, how do you think that jump gets made?
I don't think that we have an answer for that because it's all
So
theoretical.
you're
Right
just
now,
you're just going under the idea that we'll
It's
figure it
possible.
out eventually, and maybe
no.
it's
All right.
doable.
So one of the things that is a part of my goals personally is to grow my channel big enough where I can sort of crowdsource and be able to start a commune where we can run these things sort of as like a dry test, where we
But
can see exactly how the things work and the things don't work.
but you
So that
just
way
said the
we're able to look at it. But that's going to take time.
but you
And
just said
if
the
I'm
key
going to
phrase.
say, huh?
You said the key phrase. How
Yeah.
we can run it.
Yeah, everyone.
Yeah, but there if you started this, let me
Mhm.
just ask you from this question, John. You have to understand, if you started this, would you expect to run it?
No, I would
Would you
expect us
concede?
all to be together.
So you'd concede power if somebody said, "You know what, Josh, you're out. I'm speaking for everybody now."
Well, I think that the idea of anyone saying that they're speaking for everyone would make that person get out.
But
Okay,
that
but how do you make them get out?
I mean, if I was starting this commune,
Do you shoot the guy?
we would just make him leave.
How do you make him leave?
You just force him to leave.
What if he says no?
I think that in the society, the way that we have it right now, that, that's not, how do I want
we're
to
not
answer it?
talking about our society. We're talking about your imagine.
If you have
what
this
you would
commune,
imagine.
right? If you have this commune and somebody there joins and you thinking, yeah, he's into it. Everybody here's on the same page. And then this guy starts mouthing off saying, no, we're going to do this my way. What are you talking about? That's a stupid idea. Well, let's do it this way.
Well, he would
And
have no ability to do it his
but
way.
what if some of the people start agreeing with him?
Then
What if
that's
say 5% of the people start agreeing with him? And then
then that
slowly
5
he's gaining. He's slowly gaining. I'm just spitballing here. What happens?
I know. I'm just trying to answer before each
No,
additional
Go
thing.
go
ahead.
ahead.
Sorry.
What I would say is that if one guy says something like, I want to represent the will of this collective, the majority rules. So however many people are a part of his, diatribe that says that he's going to be this ruler, everybody who's in a commune is already sort of on the page that that's not what we want for the commune. So it's unlikely that someone would push that. But if they did, then they would be exiled.
Maybe. Or maybe times were hard and the people in the commune would listen to him. And then all of a sudden you have a
He
dictator.
becomes president.
Yeah, or dictator.
Or worse than president, because at least there's some checks on the power of the president.
But that's the other
Can I
thing
ask
you
you
said.
something? Hold on, can I ask? Is the president better?
Yes.
If you
president
don't
right
if you
now-
don't think
hold on.
the president right now is better than Stalin or Hitler, I feel like you don't have a good grasp on history, Josh. Like,
Well, wait a minute. You can't see. Don't say. You can't say things like that. Just
I can't.
I mean, no.
Like
hold
that-
on.
No.
those are like
We're
two of the
having-
most
we're ha-
evil
we're
people to
having a
ever
civil
live.
Conversation,
I know,
George.
I
That's
am.
propaganda.
You got to keep it civil. That was a
It's
start,
propaganda. How many millions of people do you have to murder for you to be one of the evilest people alive ever?
How
to
many
ever live?
people need to listen to what you're saying? There are hundreds of millions of people that are being oppressed right now under this
Yeah,
so-called
but you're-
democratic regime.
But see, that's the problem.
That doesn't
But
count.
it's not. That's
But
not
wait
all
a
on the
minute,
president.
Wait a minute.
That's all
Wait a
of
How
us.
is it
minute.
not?
Hold on.
How is it?
Hold
He
on.
doesn't have the power to overturn our whole system. He
doesn't
doesn't.
have the power to say
No,
whether
he-
or not corporations can have slaves.
No, he doesn't. In our system, the Supreme Court said, no, you don't get to make those decisions for another
what you're
country.
saying-
We
so what you're
believe
saying,
in
your
sovereign
defense-
nations.
Your defense of the president not engaging in slavery is that he is impotent.
Yeah,
That's your defense.
because he's
he's
a limited
impotent and he
power. He
can't
has a
resolve
limited
the
power.
problem.
He's not an
If
emperor.
you're impotent and a problem is happening, that doesn't mean that you've absolved your responsibility to resolve it.
But that's.
But
so wait a minute.
how do we
George.
fix that situation then? Do we invade these other countries?
No, you
To
just stop
get rid of the slavery?
allowing companies to have slaves.
But wait a minute.
How do
Then
you
those
stop
people starve.
What?
Then those people starve.
Oh,
There's
so
no
it's
money
good for them to be slaves.
No. You're misunderstanding what I'm saying. If economic activity ceases from, let's say, your largest employer in the country, then those people starve. Then you don't have a problem. You don't have a problem with slavery because they're dead. That's my problem.
Those people are not employed.
What
That's
you're
not
talking
what they're
about,
doing. They're
what
not
you're talk-
employed, and we're not a business
hold on.
that is saying, okay.
What you're talking about, Josh, is a term I've used before in conversations with George called economic slavery. And George hates because we've had this discussion before, and I said yes, there are economic slaves across the globe, and there 100% are, because you can go to China and they have suicide nets around buildings,
Right.
and people try to commit suicide because they absolutely hate themselves and their lives and how much they're working.
Right.
I am not advocating for those things. But what I am going to tell you is there is no slavery here in the United States, unless you're talking about economic slavery.
Still
Now, if you want to talk about what happens in China, that's because the CCP allows those things to happen,
Right.
to progress the entire community. So they allow serfs in their country to progress the community as a whole, while you have party members who are living lives of luxury and are answerable to no one. So that's the problem. I mean,
dude.
and it's the same thing. You have the same thing in Africa, where you have a warlord who's doing the exact same thing to the people he's in control of.
Yeah, man.
Africa's different.
Why is Africa
It happens though. I mean,
Africa
look
is
at the
different
cobalt
because
mines,
the
right?
conditions. Africa is different because the conditions that exist there aren't because there is leadership that is happening in Africa that is saying, you know, it would be great if Europe came and stole all our shit. That's a great economic model. That's not what's happening. They're doing the best that they can under the system that they have, and that still employs slaves, and they're certainly not free from the burden of the fact that they are using slaves. What I'm trying to say is that the CCP is responsible for the slaves that exist in their borders. And what I'm saying to you is that the United States did not end slavery. All they did was outsource it. So now we have slaves that exist everywhere around the world, in every place other than the United States. And the United States is employing
in every
those
place
slaves.
other than a liberal democracy. So really what you should be advocating for is spreading liberal democracies everywhere, because that's when you don't have slaves.
No,
Because there's no slaves in France, there's no
no,
slaves in England, there's no slaves
no.
in
That's
most
not
of these
true.
countries that are
Australia,
liberal
New
democracies.
Zealand.
There's slaves in France?
No, you're
Who's the
not
slaves?
understanding the problem. You're not
Oh, I
understanding
am.
the entire
I
problem.
am.
Are there
No, you're
slaves in
not,
Japan?
because the liberal democracy is not what is stopping slavery. First of all, slavery doesn't exist in those countries because there is a social democracy there. So they have employed socialist elements to their government to prevent this from happening. What they are doing is they're turning a blind eye towards all the slavery that they need that they're getting from other countries. So just because France right now doesn't technically employ slaves within their border doesn't mean that Ghana or that Senegal or that any other country in West Africa is free from slavery just because France no longer technically employs them.
But who's
France
enslaving?
is responsible for those colonies
Why?
having slavery.
Why are they not responsible for themselves?
Who, Ghana
Why
and
do they?
Senegal?
Yeah, all the countries. Why do they not
They're
have
being
responsibility for their own decisions?
they're being plundered. You're asking why essentially a small group of people who are being plundered by a larger, stronger force are not more powerful than the larger, stronger
When
force.
do they
Yeah, but-
have the ability? When do they have the responsibility to take responsibility? When do they take responsibility for their own decisions?
Once France removes all of its colonies from there, once France stops taking all of their money from their mines, once France stops taking all of the money and the resources
Okay.
out of that country,
So
then they'll
what
have the
about
option.
the other countries that aren't France former French colonies, right? What about
I would ask
the
what
cobalt
country.
mines? What about the cobalt mines? Okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yes, exactly.
Those companies
Are
try
Chinese owned?
really hard, pretend at least to try really hard to say, we don't want these done with slave labor.
And
We want these not done in artisanal mines. We want this done with real good mining with safety. And then companies over there from those countries say, that's what we're going to do. And
And
then
they open
they
up-
lie and use slave labor and do artisanal mining, which is with hands and no safety equipment. But they're lying about it. So how do you blame the American companies for what's happening in another country in a
Because you're
system that's corrupt
responsible.
there? Why?
Because you're responsible for your supply chain. If I choose
But you are.
to go,
That-
if I choose to go and buy a T-shirt from somebody, and I know that they use slave labor to make it, which is virtually everyone, if I know that, then I am taking part in that process. So when we're talking about the supply chain that exists there, what Nestle does is Nestle says, well, we really shouldn't use slave labor, but there's no possible way for us to know 100% because this happens in Africa where there is no oversight. And that is not an acceptable answer. You can't
how do
say
we
that they
do
don't have any
oversight?
responsibility
So how
just
do we do
because they
oversight
can't
there?
see it.
Okay, so then if
wait a
we're going to
minute, wait a
bring all
minute,
the chocolate
Wait a
here,
minute.
then they will starve, like Scott said, because nobody's going to buy their chocolate. Because if we can't use their countries because we need to know that it's not done with slave labor,
I would say
everything
that
we
there
use
needs
has to
to
be
be
made here. There's no way
no.
for
There just
American
needs to be
companies to make sure. There's no way.
there needs to be ethical consumption. And what is happening is a completely unethical way of doing it. And what happens is that we have people like you who are saying, well, what's going to happen if we don't use them? You're saying that if we're not using them, then they're just going to be free to suffer. When really what we should be saying is, how can we stop this from happening and make sure that the country is able to stand on its own 2 feet? That's
Sure.
what we should be looking at as foreign policy, but that's not what we do because no one gives a shit about these people because they're not in the United States.
So that's not necessarily true, because if U.S. companies didn't care where the cobalt was coming from, and I have some data I want to point out to you. So if American companies didn't care where the cobalt came from, they wouldn't say, "Hey, we want to make sure this is being mined ethically and safely," and then
That's naive.
Yeah.
But it is naive. But this is unfortunately, if you could talk about a tech CEO, that's how this is working. So, but they say we've did our due diligence. This Chinese company, and the two Chinese companies that have do the majority of cobalt mining in the Congo are Sino Hydro Corp and China Railway Group Limited, and they own So they own the mines, and these artisanal mines are right behind where they're at. So basically, they're just buying the hand mined cobalt directly
Mhm.
from, and then pumping it out of this building or whatever their location. So
Mhm.
if a U.S. company says, "Hey, Sinohydro, how are you? Is this ethically harvested? Are you mining correctly with safety?" "Oh yeah, we're doing that, no problem."
And they'll even show them videos.
Yeah, but then you look behind the plant, and then here's a number of African children, children all the way to adults mining cobalt with their bare hands
No safety equipment.
with
Mhm.
no safety equipment. So is that the fault of an American company trying to check on their supply chain, or
Yes.
is that a Chinese company full well knowing there's slavery
A bad
and not
actor.
caring?
They're both responsible. The Chinese
Okay.
company has no business having slave labor
Okay.
under their regime, but also the United States company, if you are using some foreign corporation to gather the base products, the commodities that you need to make your product, you are responsible for who is a part of your supply
Okay.
chain.
But
So, okay,
wait,
pause. No.
I have one more question. Stop. If so, do you think anybody from the CCP is going to that company, that Chinese-owned company? Well, it's all government-owned for the most part. Do you think they're going and saying, "Hey, is this ethically mined?" No, because they don't care.
Yeah.
But then at least the American company cares and says, "Hey, we want to make sure
At
this
least
is
they
ethically
pretend.
mined."
No,
Well,
the American company
still,
does not care.
They
The
at least
American company does
pretend.
not care.
They at least
The
pretend.
American
Virtue
company just,
signals.
huh?
They virtue signal.
Yes.
They
So
say
what they're
we
doing
checked.
is
They're all
they don't
clean minds.
exactly. They don't
But
want
let
to
me
be held
ask you
responsible.
the question here though. All right. So the American company, you say they have an ethical obligation.
Mhm.
So how do they do in that situation?
If it
China
were
has all the cobalt, okay,
mhm. what I
through
would
these
say,
mines in Africa. So what do
what
they
I
do?
would say is that the American company needs to have people that are essentially private investigators that would have to go and independently investigate these companies to make sure that they are not doing what they're saying that they're doing.
And what if
well,
that ends up with a war with China?
How would that end up with a war with China?
Well, because what happens is they're very guarded with this because they
Mhm.
know that if these videos come out, then it will hurt their bottom line. So let's say they send in some private investigators. These are American citizens, and they end up getting killed. Okay,
Mhm.
which is totally happens, right? They get killed, and that escalates tensions between the two countries because Chinese companies, which are basically the Chinese government, is killing American citizens. Then, okay, that's possible. What else does the company do if we send in investigators and say they find out that that's happening? How do they stop it? How do they
If
stop it?
I were if I'm looking at the situation in its totality, the Chinese company is really unlikely to retaliate physically and kill somebody who's an American citizen, specifically because they don't want to lose the business of the company who is providing those citizens that are looking at the system. Because you have to keep in
It
mind that China 25% of China's economy is selling
sure,
shit just to the U.S. So
absolutely.
yep.
they can't afford to have a war with the U.S. and lose 25% of their economy. So
Right.
that's why they will do everything within their power to
Uh,
avoid escalation rather
well, I
than
don't
to
know
push
about
for
that
something.
because they always push back against us because they think we're so fattened on the teeth that we can't actually fight back. So
I feel like
they'll push it. They'll push, and they're probably right. Right? We're all
Mhm.
high on cheap Chinese crap.
Yeah, I
Right?
feel like both countries are two fat kids on the playground who are kind of like pushing into each other, but don't really want anything bigger than that.
Yeah.
Because China will do things to slightly provoke the U.S., and the U.S. will do things to slightly provoke China. But that's just business, and I think
So
that they both understand that.
Well, I think China, in their long-term plan, is to usurp the U.S. as the world power, though. I think they've stated that as a goal.
I
But
don't think that they have
that
that ability based on their
I,
economy.
I'm not
I
disagreeing
agree.
with you at all. But I think that is their goal. But they do kill journalists that are trying to record these things. They do. They
Mhm.
do. They do those things there.
Well,
And what
Mhm.
if it's not the Chinese company, but it's an African guy working for the Chinese company that doesn't realize he's killing an American, and that escalates tensions.
well, one more thing. When the cobalt mining, the artesian mines were exposed, I forgot the journalist's name. He was on Joe Rogan. I'm trying to
Yeah,
look it up, but my phone's not getting service. So
yeah, I
I
know the
forgot
guy.
his name. Shout out.
That
But
was a good
so
video.
he
was a good
documented,
interview.
and he even said there were a number of times where he thought he was going to get shot, get killed
Right.
by security services, keeping people away from these mines.
Mhm.
So once again, I mean, I don't know if those security services were employed by the Chinese companies or if they were employed by, the government of the Congo to protect, the income coming in. I can't tell you for sure, but
Mhm.
I mean, once again, if you're going to kill journalists just for trying to look at the atrocities and the humanitarian crisis with cobalt mining, as the Congo, right? I think it's the Congo. What is it? The Democratic Congo
Yeah.
Republic.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
Democratic
it's-
Republic of the Congo.
It's
yeah,
either one
sorry.
of those things.
So
yeah.
if the government's killing those people from exposing this, or if
Yeah.
if a Chinese company is hiring locals to do the same, how once again, how is this a justification to say, well, this is a capitalist problem when this isn't necessarily a capitalist problem? There's like a veil between.
Because capitalism has created the entire system in which this problem exists. So
Which
capitalism has pulled all the resources outside of these countries. They have installed warlords into these places because it's more convenient for them for business interests. Because if they have a democratically elected government, then they probably wouldn't allow them to exploit the country as much as they are. There is all sorts of business interests that are involved in keeping people poor so that way they make as much money as possible. And an
I
inherent
don't
part
disagree
of
with you there.
capitalism, an inherent part of capitalism is that there must always be an ever increasing amount of profit. And if that doesn't happen, then they need to squeeze as much as they possibly can. And what ends up happening is that all the people that work for this, that are a part of this supply chain, end up getting squeezed and crushed out.
So my question, I'm going to put you on the spot here, Josh, because I don't know your politics. But if you
Yep.
were to vote, I'm just curious, which party
He's a
would you be
communist.
voting
He
for?
told us his politics.
No. Because
That's his
still,
politics.
wait a
He's a
minute,
communist.
George. He's still a part of the system, so there's no communist party here in the U.S. Which I'm just
No.
curious, which party?
No,
would
no,
you
no. It
vote
doesn't
for?
work.
No,
like
I'm
that.
gonna. There's a point to this. So which party would you vote for?
I don't vote for either party. If I was going to vote, it would probably be for Cornel West, but I don't vote because I think that voting is a pointless thing.
Okay.
So go ahead.
But okay, so you say voting's a pointless thing, but that's I would take that as like a civic duty. I mean, that's what our civic duty is to
an
vote
illusion.
and cast your voice. It
There's
may
an
be.
argument for that.
There is an argument for that, and it may be, but at least you have a voice. I mean, it's the
You
same
have
thing in your
two sides of the same coin. You have
sure.
the right-wing corporatist party and you have the left-wing corporatist party. And that's
Right.
all that you have. And neither
Right
one of
now.
them are going to hold any of these companies accountable for anything.
But that's
And
not historical.
it's not worth my time to pretend and participate in this system that they've set up specifically so that way I won't do things that will actually change things.
I
Because
can
that's
see
why
what you're
voting
saying.
exists.
I can see what you're saying. That's partially true. In times when things are not working correctly, that's what voting's used for. But now, historically, that's not all the time. We elected Abraham Lincoln, right? As a country, they voted in Abraham Lincoln,
Yeah.
knowing it could start a freaking war and willing to go to war to stop slavery. That is a thing that voting did. It just is, right? Voting did that.
I would say that there's consequences for voting in rare events like Abraham Lincoln, but largely the system has been streamlined. There's no more political candidate that is so far outside the spectrum that if they were voted in, that things would actually change, because they've made this system in such a way that if you don't participate in the way that the business interests want, then you get a ride in Dallas. That's just the way that it is. And there's no way for you to affect change within the system that they've designed.
So I've been reading this, but we've been reading this book called The Fourth Turning is Here. Have you ever heard of that book?
No.
Okay. In that book, Neil Howell, he's a demographer or whatever, and a historian.
Mhm.
And he points to these historical nature of human society, how it's very cyclical. It goes through these these generational cycles that last about 4 generations. And then every 4th generation or so, you end up in a crisis where things have broken down and are working so crappy that everything goes to hell. And then everything breaks down. And then we pull back together, fix it, and then are good for another 20 years. And then things start slowly breaking.
100 years.
No, I mean, it starts after just the 20-year good grace period, and then things start falling apart again. All right.
No,
And
because
so
you have
his
spring,
hypothesis
summer,
is
fall.
right. But his hypothesis is right now we're in the middle of that 4th turning. And so that feeling that you're feeling is what people were feeling in the Depression, right? That feeling that you're feeling is what people were feeling right before the Civil War, what people were feeling right before the American Revolution. Okay. Things were in flux. Everything was not working correctly. And that's a natural part of the cycle. And now we're at the point where it's going to get so bad that eventually we fix it. Okay, that's his theory.
Mhm.
My thing is, I think you have identified actual real problems, but what I
Mhm.
don't think you've identified is real solutions.
And
So, sorry, go ahead, Scott.
no. I just keep coming back to the same point: is who's going to speak for the country? Who's going to stand up? So the U.S. government under the Constitution was only supposed to have, I think it was three things it was supposed to do: protect the citizenry and the borders, collect tariffs, and I forgot what the third one is. Ensure like
Interstate commerce,
interstate commerce, and anyways, but
mostly
that's
yeah.
all they were supposed to be doing. And it's changed, it's morphed, and they do way more than just those 3 things now. But there has to be a governing body. That's the problem.
I think you're getting caught up in something here, Scott.
Semantics?
Yes, because what he's saying is right now there does. The goal should be to get to a point where there isn't.
What if China?
Maybe you can, or maybe you
To
can't.
use the argument, what if we all turn into a commune like you'd like, Josh, and we have no set leader, no system of checks and of protection for the people of the country, and all of a sudden China goes, you know what? They got a lot of good land over there that they're not using. We're just coming to take it. So
What I'm saying isn't just everybody throws their hands up and then they say, tra la la, we'll do the best that we can. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that the way that we envision the future, the perfect society that we have, that's not possible right this moment, right?
Okay.
What we envision for ourselves may not be possible right in this moment, but it should just be our goal to start walking towards that direction, so that way we're improving the things that we can. Because
in your opinion, the whole globe would have to be just one big commune.
Well, that's always been the communist.
Right.
That's always been the communist goal.
But no, wait a minute. Without a hierarchy.
Right.
Yes.
So basically, this is a poor analogy, but it's as close as I can think of. So the whole country operates under one big Native American tribe, because I'm sure you're aware when the Native Americans held court, or when they all talked, everybody had a say. They can talk as long as they want.
You're painting with a big brush.
I know.
There was thousands of tribes. They all had different systems. Some of them worked like that. Some of them didn't.
I'm just saying.
The Aztecs sure didn't do that.
No, they didn't.
The Aztecs were right for behaving the way that they did, because what happened when the Spaniards came?
Well, they didn't know that the Spaniards.
So the sacrificing humans
50,000
is where I'm against the Aztecs, not the fighting the conquistadors. I don't have a problem with that, right?
Yes, but
50,000 people to consecrate a temple is a lot of human sacrifice. That's all.
But I feel like that's a trivial thing about a culture that doesn't really matter to us right now, because it's not a model.
Trivial if you're not one of the 50,000. Then it's trivial.
And just like I would say that you have the same sort of attitude with brushing off the slaves that exist in every other country.
I see, again, I don't think that it's trivial. I think you've identified problems, but I don't see where your ideas get us to any kind of a solution. I think the best way to solve those problems is to raise the quality of living as much as we can, everywhere, as fast as we can. And the only way to do that is with capitalism.
No.
With constraints. Not laissez-faire.
Yes, once you employ capitalism, though, the inherent part of the system that you have to consider is that capitalism dictates that a whole bunch of people have to give up a portion of their work, a portion of their value, up to someone at the top who may or may not have anything to do with this business at all, right?
Well, so
If we're
Josh,
talking about capitalism, there will always be exploitation. It can't function without it. And if we're talking about raising people's quality of living, then we have to look at that from a compassionate view rather than from an individualistic, we have to have,
I disagree.
competition and things like that. That's not going to help.
I disagree.
So one thing I wanted to bring up, and we're going to cover this in when we do interview my mother-in-law, but so under the Soviet era, how their communes worked basically is you'd have a village, right? And then everybody would contribute to the communal gardens or bees or whatever it is. So
Yeah.
you do your own work, and then you would go to the commune and work every day, or
Yeah.
the commune, like the local whatever, the
Yeah.
the local farm or whatever you want to call it. So what happens, and this actually happened to my wife and mother-in-law. Will expand on this when we interview them. So my wife's great grandmother would be like, "Oh no, I'm a good communist or a good Soviet. I'm going to go and tend the bees. Nobody else tends the bees except me." And then I take care of my own food here at my house, and then I go and work in the communal garden. So, and that was her mentality, to be a good member of society. But then there were also people that didn't do those things. So, what would stop in your system somebody just sloughing off and deciding they're not going to participate at the same
would
level
say
as others?
one of the things that needs to be addressed about communism, especially during that era, is that they were trying to vastly beef up their military. So what they were doing is they were having the people working in the fields. They would be working for more than what they needed because they were
Sure.
selling grain in order to make sure that they were getting as much money as possible that they were
Sure.
all putting onto their military. And that's one of the big reasons why they fell, is because they wasted money on shit that they didn't need instead of feeding their people.
Well,
So
if you look at
when we're looking,
historically, they needed a strong military historically. If you go back far enough, however many times Russia's been invaded over the past 2,000 years,
well,
I mean,
have a
that's
border as
kind.
long as Russia.
Yeah,
What
there
are you
you
gonna
go.
do?
So, I mean, you get what I'm saying, though, is
Yeah.
So, I mean, but that means you have a serf or you have somebody working in a field producing
who
more than
doesn't
they
want to.
need to go to something else. So, once again, and I keep coming back to the same point, is with the system you propose, even if it's not global on a global scale, you have to do those things to protect the place you live.
Well,
You have to.
even if it is a global
So,
scale, though,
so to
right?
finish
What?
my thought
Yeah.
from
Yep.
before,
Sorry,
so
Josh.
that was one of the big reasons why Russia fell, was because they were
Yep.
trying to compete with the U.S. militarily, and that just wasn't necessary at the time. The Cold War essentially sapped all of their money out. But if they were working just towards feeding themselves and living a peaceful life and not dedicating their money to nuclear missiles and things like that, then they would have had a lot longer of a stretch. It
Well,
wouldn't
you
have
could
been
also argue that
taken
if
out.
they didn't have the politicians in charge living in giant mansions on rivers or lakes, they might have had more money to go to the common person too. But
Yeah,
what do
I
you
would say that. I
do?
mean, corruption happens in every system. There's no way
Yep.
right now to
But
be able to say
the
that
point is, corruption happens in every system, but your system is dependent on there being no corruption.
my system is dependent upon the idea that we're trying to remove the corruption that exists from classes. So what we're saying is that when you have a hierarchical society, there's going to be obviously corruption that happens because you're valuing the class of the person rather than what it is that they're actually doing. So from my perspective, what we would be doing is removing the motivations for corruption. So instead of having things like Elon Musk, where he can be worth $200 billion, we wouldn't have that, right? There wouldn't be people who are working towards having billions of dollars. There would just be people who are working to fulfill their lives. And if you had to work on a
what if
farm,
the only thing fulfilling their lives is playing video games?
that's fine.
How do you make them work? How do you make them
You'd
work?
be fine to do. Well, first of all, I mean, if we're being real, video games probably wouldn't be created in this society
But there are
because there would be
now.
no profit motive. So it's
Yeah.
unlikely that video games would exist. But people would have to look at it from, I wanted to exactly bring up when you were talking about Native Americans. When you have a society that is non-hierarchical for the most part, they had elders, of course, but they didn't have like class systems per se. A lot of the natives that existed in the US were part of a community, and that's the way that they viewed it. So everyone had a job, and if you weren't doing your job, you were looked at as a bad person who was not fulfilling his obligations, and your family would sort of get you to do it. So if we're talking about how we structure ourselves, we should be looking at a model where everyone is motivated positively and given positive motivations towards being a good member of society rather than having, harsh repercussions if you don't do it. We should go towards positive motivations rather than harsh repercussions.
So
Yeah, but you have to have both, right? I mean, there's still going to be some people who are going to be free riders. They're going to. It's just, and you're right.
Have you?
Cultural carrots and sticks can be very persuasive, right? But what you're
In
talking about is a small scale, right?
what
How
I'm
do
talking about
you don't have cities
is
in this situation that you're talking about. You can't have
if we're
cities.
talking about this is something important for people who are listening. If you want to learn more about this particular structure, read Thomas More's Utopia. That talks about how people would be dealt with. So if you are a part of society and you have all these positive motivations, your family will support you and love you, and everybody will give you a pat on the back if you're doing what you're supposed to. If you do not fulfill your obligations, then you get exiled from your town and you have to live on your own. And that's just the way that it is. And if
basically
you want to gain access back into the town, then you have to be willing to do the 3 hours of farm work or
Gotcha.
whatever.
So no cities. Those are out. In your situation, you can't have cities. It's gone.
I think that you can have cities. It's just the way that you would look at each neighborhood as being a unit.
I don't see how cities can function, but okay. Okay. What's the incentive for somebody to make something amazing?
Just the pleasure of making something amazing. That's what everyone did in human society before capitalism was created.
No.
well,
Yeah.
No, they made something amazing so they
could.
they made something amazing so that they would be adding value and thus have the access to the best mates.
So before the
If
Renaissance,
someone, when they made the wheel, when the first caveman made the wheel, he
You
was
better
doing that to
believe he
make
made it so he could get laid. He made that
He did
wheel
it
so
to make
that
his work easier.
yes, so he would
Necessity is
have
the mother
more
of invention.
stuff. So he would have more stuff, or his work was easier. So he would have more food, or he would have more things to attract a mate.
so he
That's
could be more
conjecture.
That's the
productive.
character. That's what. Okay, you're right. That's conjecture, but that's based on we've studied all other species on the planet.
Yeah.
Right? There's culture, there's evolution, carrots and
No,
sticks. We believe that's how things evolve. Now maybe I'm wrong,
No.
and maybe that's not how evolution works. But
I would
sexual
say-
selection is huge.
Again, read Peter Kropotkin's Mutual Aid and Evolution, and that will show you lots of examples.
what does
of
he
mutual
say?
aid.
Right. So what does he
shows
say?
pretty much examples where, like, penguins and different animal societies where they essentially just function together just because that's what's best for the society.
Sure, but they're not all. If they
They're stupid.
well,
That's the problem, right? There's too many smart people that are going to be like, well, if I just do
wait,
this,
I mean,
or
if
why
you're
don't I
talking
do
about
that?
emperor penguins and the pebbles, right?
Yeah.
The female will choose the penguin with the best pebble. So that's still sexual selection based on what this male penguin can bring her.
Right.
Well, I would say that if you're looking at society in the micro level and you're talking about each individual person, there's going to be a motivation for you to choose your partner no matter what it is.
Right.
For
But
someone
there's-
who chooses,
and that's
you
my
might choose
point.
someone. You might choose
That's the
someone based
hierarchy.
on. Hold on. You might choose someone based on something that has nothing to do with what they have. It has,
Yep.
it's completely subjective.
You might.
100%.
But statistically, on average, a female is going to pick the person that gives her offspring the best chance to survive. And is that going to be somebody that tries hard and is inventing stuff and creating stuff? Maybe. It depends on the cultural carrots and sticks, but it also depends on what's going on in that environment at that time. But there's a natural hierarchy there because some humans are going to be more capable, and you want to incentivize them to be good at being capable because we all benefit. We all benefit from the
I think
successes of the most capable humans.
I think what you're talking about is much more diverse than what you're sort of presenting it as, because
Sure.
there could be incentivizing for all sorts of things, incentivizing for lying, incentivizing for manipulation. You could
Absolutely.
be incentivized towards violence. You could be incentivized for all sorts of different things.
Rape
And
is a
saying, yeah.
viable strategy to mate. It just is, and that sucks. But you're right.
Well, what I'm trying to say is that rape shouldn't be on the table.
It's not.
Oh no, no,
And
no.
that's
because-
why we have society, right? To make sure rape's off the
But
table.
that's
That's
my
one of the
point.
biggest reasons.
That is my
Right.
point.
So-
is
No,
that
but
we
that's my
shouldn't
point
be-
too.
We shouldn't be catering towards the idea that, like, well, some animals might rape.
No.
can't
We try
have
to
that kind of
protect.
attitude.
Well,
You
no,
have
our
to be able
attitude should
to-
be understanding how
what is
humans
the
work.
best. Yes, what is the
No.
best that we could be doing?
What is the most workable solution?
So-
Right. It has to be possible.
No, because what you're saying is that if
I like it.
the system has hold on. What
No,
you're saying is that if the system
I'm
has
glad that you said that. That's awesome. That you think.
what
I think that's great. Keep going.
what we're saying is that if you go with just what is the best workable system, then what you're saying is you're capitulating to say that, well, this system may require some rape, and we can't think of a society where there's no rape. The idea that there is something wrong inherently in people is something that you can't just have society not address. And
No,
we
what
have
I would be
society
saying
to-
though,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, but what I would say there is not that what's workable solution is disincentivize rape as much as possible, punish the people that rape as much as possible to make sure that we do our best to make sure that doesn't happen. But
Mhm.
to not pretend like humans aren't going to have a certain percentage of the population that are willing to do that.
Or here's the next.
But what
problem.
I'm
That's
saying
the
is
problem.
no. But what I'm saying is, in that our society is that we should be sort of breeding it out as if it were. You should be organizing society where the drive to be violent or the drive to rape or do things like that should be removed gradually from society, rather than having the attitude that we need to have some sort of artificial bulwark against it.
Okay.
Because what
Clarify
you're saying
how you
is,
do that then.
just like I said, it takes time. It's not something that's going to happen
Right.
overnight, but we need to be producing.
But I'm assuming you don't mean killing people who have violent tendencies when we test them when they're kids. So you
No.
must think there's a way to do it without doing that. So how would you do it?
And the way that I would say it is that school, the environment that we have for children, would be vastly different, because the way that we have school right now is pretty much to cater towards businesses. Children go to school when their parents are working. That's why they go to school during these hours.
And
What
they're
we should
taught
be
to
having-
follow timelines. They're taught all these
Yeah.
other things. I'm not disagreeing with you there.
Yeah.
Again,
Yeah. So
I
the
think
way-
kids would be better playing outside quite often.
But those
Yes.
things are
Yeah.
pivotal to success in the society and the culture we have.
Maybe,
100%.
Yeah.
maybe.
Well,
I would
I
say
mean,
that
hey,
maybe.
maybe.
Well, and so okay. Back to the Soviet system. They changed.
Say it with a Russian accent.
Back to the Soviet system. So what they did was they took class. So if you had a class of 300 kids,
Yeah.
what they would do is
Kill the first three.
stop. They would sort they would sort all 300 into 3 groups. So we've talked about this before, and this is what the Soviet system did, because you could only have so many people in math and the sciences. So those were your smartest, highest performing, hardest working children. And then you'd have the B class, which were businessmen, literature, English, things that were benefiting the society, but not to the level of the math and sciences. And then you had C class, which those are the guys that played outside. And
Mhm.
those were the guys that were going to go, no, seriously. And
They were special. Don't be a dick,
no,
Scott. They were
might not
special.
they might not have been the smartest, but
They were
those are the
special.
people that were going to do hard labor, and the school dictated what class you were in, A, B, or C. So that's how they populated their workforce. Is you'd specially train a third, you would moderately train the other third, and then you'd barely train the last third, just to basically run machinery, do production work, maybe fix machinery, stuff like that. So either way,
It's still a hierarchy.
you have to, and you're going to, like, when you were saying, like, oh well, everybody would, maybe I'm paraphrasing, everybody would do what they'd want to do or what they were good at, right? So once
Well, what
again,
they were
like
free
George,
to do.
what they were free to do. But that means at some
Mhm.
point in their time, they would have to do something that was towards the community and not just what they wanted to do. You get my point?
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
you have to train that
need that.
in every society. You have, I mean, if you're going to function in a societal hierarchy or a societal system, not even hierarchy, you have to be productive to a certain extent to
Mhm.
support one another.
Yes,
So
what I'm saying is that the idea of where the motivation comes from is just to provide the basic needs for everyone. Once you
sure,
have housing, once you have clothing, once you have food on the table, once you have the bare necessities of what you need, then you have all the time to do whatever is fulfilling for yourself. So
sure.
if you're someone who, you wake up in the morning and I'm an able-bodied person, so I'm going to go out to the farm and I'm going to work 3 hours out there, and some of my compatriots in the town are going to be doing the same thing, and then once I'm done there, that's it for the day. So I get to choose whatever I want to do. So if I want to
It only
read,
works small scale,
if I want to, well, it works on whatever scale you would have, because you're saying that you would have some people that would be doing something like shearing sheep, and then you sell the commodity of wool to another place, but it wouldn't be selling, it would be trading, and you'd be trading for commodities. So it's not exactly, it is scalable. It's just that we don't have the exact blueprint yet because it's never been done.
So
I think the reason it's never been done is because it's not scalable.
but then the other, I mean, okay, so let's say we use your system, and my wife's very pretty, and I want to buy, or I want to take more of my trade goods and buy her some nice silk or something like that. And then all of a sudden, my wife's walking around town in nice silk, while everybody else isn't. Don't you think that's going to create a envy? Yeah, I guess is the best term, where another woman's going to look at her and say, "Well, I want a silk dress like that," and then henpeck her husband until he works harder to be able to buy those things, and all of a sudden, silk. Wait a minute, Josh, you laugh,
I mean, it
but that's how
happens.
this works. I mean, I'm serious. Even if you're talking about a communal system, I guarantee you there were, even if you want to go back to Native Americans, I guarantee you somebody would make something special or
Mhm.
of higher quality for somebody else if they had the goods to trade. So then once
What
again
I
we
would
get,
say,
go ahead.
yeah. What I would say is that, first of all, the idea that we're looking at someone's property as the thing that will fulfill us is a problem. In my society, in my version of society, people will be re-looking at the way that we value things, because in a capitalist society, the way that we look at things is that you have only so much time in a day, and a lot of ads are being thrown at you. You have a lot of things that are motivating you towards being a consumer. And so when we
That's true.
look at things like this, you're looking at it and saying, well, what if someone has something different than someone else? And your immediate thought is that there's going to be strife because of it, instead of just, how did you make that dress? That looks beautiful. I would love to do that. Maybe I'll grab some silk the next time I'm in that shop and I'll, make my own dress or whatever. Or you can have someone who is making a certain kind of shoe or something that people really like, and they say, "Oh man, that's an awesome shoe. I love that design." And then he says, "Oh, well, that's great. If I'll make 5 of these shoes if you choose to work on the farm 2 days a week for me," or whatever the case may be. You can still swap. There's no, nothing wrong with people being able to be free to exchange goods. It's just the idea of consumerism being the basis for what we're doing is not going to be happening.
Well, so there's I think there's a lot of I think I've done a good job of identifying faults in the system. Okay.
Mhm.
But I think if you want to actually fix those faults, you'd be much better off. And this is just my 2 cents. Sorry if I'm making you, or if you feel like I'm attacking you or anything like that. But I think you'd be much better off trying to figure out how to fix those faults while working within the current system, instead of trying to get something that is unattainable. Because I think what you forget is how much things have already improved. Like your Facebook page is called Nothing is Going to Get Better, but statistically, things have gotten better,
My page,
even all over the world.
just as a
Right.
heads up, my page, Nothing is Going to Get Better. It's the opposite of its literal meaning. So it comes from the
Okay,
Lorax.
explain that.
It comes from the
I'm sorry.
Lorax. Nothing, unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. So
Oh,
the idea is
gotcha.
that if you don't put in the effort to care, then nothing is going to get better.
that's
Well,
a good point.
Josh, I have a business, and I could tell you that if you're not gonna, it's very difficult to sacrifice. This is how business works, even in capitalism. So small business, you sacrifice, or I'm sacrificing. I've sacrificed the last 3 or 4 years of my time, energy, and income to grow my business to where it is, till finally, after you last long enough and you've worked hard enough, to where you can grow it into something bigger and something larger, to where you're doing what you're good at. Like it's maybe selling jobs or meeting customers or whatever that may be. But while I guess the goal is to be prosperous and hire more people and pay them well, right? That's the goal. And I've paid my employees more than I've paid myself in 1 year than I've made in 4 years, personally. So
So there's another model.
Yeah, but
just because it's capitalism doesn't mean that everybody's against each other.
Well, when you're looking at models for business in the United States, 54% of all businesses are actually just corporations. So 54% of all people employed in the U.S. are employed by large-scale corporations. And
sure,
then
you say corporations, but you don't have to be large scale to be a corporation.
Well, Walmart by itself employs 1/3
Right.
of all
So
people.
I want to specify.
Are,
So you mean large corporations. You don't just mean corporations.
Yes.
You mean
Actually,
large
yeah.
corporations.
Well,
Okay.
Yes, because
the
80%
government is the
80%
largest employer
of
in the country.
I think we looked that up,
80%
and
of
they're
small
like third or
businesses
something.
80% of small businesses don't have any employees at all. So the amount of people, of businesses that are small, that employ people, is relatively small in terms of however many people that are being gainfully employed totally. But the idea is still, I'm having these people work for me and they are giving me the surplus value of their labor, which is inherently a bad thing.
No. See, now in his model, that's not it. All right. The idea is this guy is working for me, and together we are building a surplus model. Okay. That is more small businesses than not. But I think you did hit the nail on the head with this giant corporations problem we have. Okay. And if you look at what happened with COVID, all that did was make it way worse. Big companies could be open and little companies had to close their doors. And I think the way to fix that is to not throw away corporations. It's to incentivize small businesses, because you're a lot less likely to fuck over your employees if there's only 4 of them and you see them every day.
Yeah.
It's just,
but that's sort of just, you're having the same problem just at a small scale.
Because I disagree. I think you're
problem,
not having the same problem at all.
Well, I have a question.
When you have people who work for you and they are giving up surplus value of their labor to you, I got a perfect example for you. There's a small business person that I know, right? And this small business person owns a franchise, right? He owns a franchise of another business. And with this franchise, he hired a service manager, he hired an insurance sales adjuster, he hired an office manager, and then he hired all of his workers, right? He does not do anything in the company. His job is not, he doesn't have a job. His job is to just collect the money, the surplus value of everyone else's labor. That's his job.
Yeah, but wait a minute.
Is that
So,
ethical?
well, here's the question. How did he get the money to become a franchisee? Because you have to pay. How did he get the money to start the business and open it and then hire these people? How long did he go without a paycheck while the business was growing, or your communal presence was growing to where you had repeat customers over and over and over again? How long did these things happen? So in my personal, you can answer that. Just give me 1 second. In
Yep.
my personal experience, I've gone 4 years without a paycheck. Basically, I've made $40,000 in 4 years now, and I can tell you I've worked way more than I've ever worked in my life trying to get this thing off the ground. But now, let's say this year I don't know, we have a stroke of luck and we do very well. Can I pay myself back for those 4 or 5 years? I mean, if I gave you my hourly rate for the past 4 years, you'd probably laugh because it's in the pennies on the dollar. So you're like 50 cents an hour, something like that. So would you fault me for collecting more money for the next 5 years than I've ever, would you fault me for
Is
that?
it going to stop after 5 years?
I don't know. Why would it? I sacrificed 4 years of income.
Well, it depends, right?
Okay, so the idea here is that because you have invested some of your time and some of your money, the problem is that the capitalist in the system is returned on their investment forever. So you will go the rest of your life earning money off of this, which is hundreds of times what you will have invested into it.
Well, Josh,
and we have,
but you have to understand, I spent 20 years getting myself financially to the point where I could have a business. And then I spent 4 years of not collecting a paycheck to where, I can grow the business. And I've worked not 40 hours a week, not 80 hours a week, maybe more. So why can't I get a return on my 25 years of investment?
You're not. It's not that you can't get a return on your investment. The problem is proportionally the return, and also what is the capitalist providing in the system. Now, in your personal business, you're not really the capitalist per se. I would say that whoever, like, if you got a loan from a bank, they're the capitalist in the system because they're providing the capital. But if we're talking about, a small business that has a few employees under it, you're still a part of a capitalist model, but it's so small that it's hard to sort of like eke out the differences there. Because just like you said, you may have invested 20 years into it. So if you get 20 years back, then you're sort of breaking even. But that's not really what we're talking about when we're talking about capitalism, because capitalism is much, much bigger than that. And like I said, 54% of all jobs are provided by corporations. So these people are enormous. We have people like the Walton family I always like to bring up because we have generational wealth now. We have someone, Sam Walton, created Walmart in the 60s, and he died in the early 1990s. His family is still receiving billions of dollars per year on that investment. So not only was he paid back what he invested, he was paid back hundreds of times that amount. Plus, now his kids, who never worked for the company, who don't do anything for it, are receiving billions of dollars on top of that. Is that ethical when their employees are making minimum wage?
One point. I'm going to say yes. And the reason why is if everybody has a problem with the Walton family making so much money, stop buying their product.
That's impossible.
Stop shopping
working there.
That's impossible. What you're describing is the problem of ethical consumption. The problem of ethical consumption under capitalism is a huge thing. I've made the comparison before where I said, if I try to say, like, I'm not going to buy a Nestle brand cookie because they use slave labor for their cocoa. But if I try to find another cookie brand, they're all owned by Nestle. They're all owned just by different parent companies that are all doing the same thing. I can't opt out of the system even if I want to.
Yes, you can, because you don't have to eat a cookie.
No, that
you can grow your own vegetables.
Not getting the point.
No, you can grow your own vegetables and you can raise your own cow and do that. You could do that.
You can take yourself out of the system.
Hold on.
That's the point.
You could.
No, you can't, because that doesn't work for everyone. What you're saying is that
you
if
could.
I want, hold on.
I'm saying you
what
could.
You're saying is that if you want to avoid capitalism, if you want to avoid the pitfalls that come along with capitalism. You have to dedicate your entire life towards living this agrarian lifestyle where you have to raise your own stocks. And then on top of that, you have to just forget about everybody else who is currently being abused by the system.
But
That
that-
doesn't work.
But I got to interject. Okay, a couple of things. First, but what you just said is basically how you described everything working anyway. Okay, in your system, you're going to have to go farm anyway. All right, so it's the same thing.
No,
But-
it's not, because I wouldn't be. What you're saying is that I'm essentially trying to escape. That I would be trying to escape capitalism and still looking at myself as the main person. So I would be looking at myself. What do I have to do for myself? I have to shear my sheep so that way I can get wool for myself. And what I'm saying is that looking at society from a perspective of just what am I doing for myself and fuck everybody else who's stuck in capitalism, that is not a healthy point of view, and it's not ultimately going to bring us to where we want to be.
Okay. So the one main fault with everything we were just talking about, though, is
that you see.
what you see as exploitative, I see as optional, and especially in America. Okay. Maybe in other countries there's not as much options, but nobody's got a gun to their head that they have to work at Walmart. And nobody's got a gun to their head that they have to work at McDonald's. They just don't.
Well,
If you don't like having to work for minimum wage, you can try to better yourself and get a better job. You literally can. There's no,
But-
you can learn a trade. You can do anything. I
You're
mean,
still
the fucking government
you're
will give
still
you an
saying-
iPhone and you can watch videos and learn how to do something useful and then go get a job doing it. Like,
you
there's
are
no
still
gun to your head.
saying, you're still saying, what am I going to do for me and fuck everybody else?
No.
Because if they have
No,
to work
my
at
point
Walmart,
is,
listen
you
to
say
me.
it's
If they have to
exploitative,
go,
and I don't think it's exploitative.
it is, because there's
It's
no
a
way
trade.
that Walmart can function without it. There's no way
No,
that McDonald's
no,
can
because-
function without it.
But let's go look at it even as Scott's
Someone
example. Okay?
works for McDonald's, whether it's me or someone else. Someone works for McDonald's.
Somebody is choosing to. They're selling their time to McDonald's because they don't want to do something else, or because they're doing that while they're working towards something else.
Because they don't want to live in a cardboard box.
Maybe, but they could, if they don't want to keep working there, there's no gun to their head to keep working there. There's
I think
ways
you'll
to
find
better
the
yourself.
threat of homelessness is very coercive.
And hunger is the same one.
But the point is they can better themselves. They're choosing to sell their time for what they're choosing.
So
You're taking
you're
away any
defining-
self-responsibility. People
You're
are responsible for
defining-
their own decisions.
You're defining what is better is based upon what is marketable, and that is not the same thing. This
Well-
is where we keep running into the same problems, is that my perspective is not about enriching someone else. It is not about participating in a system that tells you that you can get as little as is legally allowed to be paid for you to work here. My perspective on this is that you should not be a part of a consumer culture where the idea that I can do something better for me, therefore the system isn't that bad, that's not an answer.
Well, no, let me explain what I'm trying to say, because I don't think I'm explaining it well. You talked about corporations, all capitalism is exploitative. Okay.
Mhm.
But I don't see it that way in a lot of cases. Now, you're right that it can be. But let's look at Scott's situation, and a lot of business owners, right? He's paying an employee to do a job. He has only a couple employees. They're labor. Okay. They work hard,
skilled labor.
skilled labor. They work hard, but they don't want to run their own company.
Mhm.
They want to just get a check for doing what they know how to do. So it's not exploitative. And there are companies like that. There are a lot of them. And I would argue that the people in America who work at McDonald's, it's the same thing. It's not exploitative.
Do they want a paycheck, or do they want to live comfortably, and the paycheck is what is the mechanism that provides that? This is the
So-
problem that you're having, is that you're
that's
still
the real
putting
world.
yourself,
Yeah.
but it's just a function of the system that currently exists. So if we're saying, these guys are skilled laborers and they may not want to own their own company, and that's totally fine. But what I'm trying to say is that the reason why they're working at all, the reason why they're working in certain companies, is because they need the paycheck in order to not die. And we shouldn't be organizing society around what is the least that I can do so that I don't die.
Well, Josh, and unfortunately, what you just said is human nature. Some people.
You guys are relying hard on that human nature.
Well, no, that's true because
I think it's a thing.
Some people
I just do.
want to do just enough to survive.
True.
They don't want to put any more effort in than what they
And
have,
that's fine. That's great.
which is good for them. If that's what
Ambition
they want
is not a trait that is to everywhere the same.
Yes.
If that-
What I'm saying to you is that what happens if you, instead of being in a society where you were having to work to grow a business, to get a paycheck, and then that paycheck provides you with the luxuries that you deem are necessary for yourself. What I'm saying is, what happens if you just wanted to learn? If you just wanted to learn a language? What happens if you just wanted to make pottery and that would be your job, but the market doesn't see a value in it? The idea that you are now organizing your entire life, your children's life, everyone who is around you, you are organizing the entirety of society around the idea that I have to do something for someone or else I die.
But you don't have to do something for someone.
You have to do something.
Yeah.
Not for
So-
someone. That's the optional part.
so
you have to do something to make food or some way to get
trade
food,
for food.
or you will die, because that's how we all live.
So the one thing I wanted to bring up, Josh, is and everybody,
Okay, but we should
hold on.
wrap this
Stop
up
it.
soon, though.
Stop. We got time.
It's
We're
an
good.
hour and 40 minutes
It's
into
fine.
this, guys.
Yeah,
Nobody's going to still be watching
People
at
are
this
going to
point.
watch this. Trust me.
And
Yes.
now
So-
we are literally at the point. If you're still watching right now, go to the comments and put in George is an idiot.
Yep, that's fair.
That's
So,
all.
Josh-
If you comment George is an idiot, then I'll know you made it to the 1 hour and
See-
38-minute mark.
I
So-
think
35
people are
minute
listening
mark.
to it because this is a very good conversation where both sides have.
I
good back
hope
and
you're
forth.
right.
So
I hope you're right.
the one thing
But
I
it's
wanted
an
to
hour
add,
and
stop,
5
George,
minutes.
is so Jeff Bezos, Amazon.
Yeah.
Everybody in the U.S. could bankrupt Amazon tomorrow if they stopped using Amazon. And why don't we do it? Because it's convenient, because you can watch movies, you can read books, you could do anything you want, you can buy and have it instantaneously. It's a service that everybody wants. That's why it's not going anywhere.
But I feel like you're not understanding what he's saying.
I understand 100% what he's saying.
He's saying we need to change how that even is a thing.
Yeah.
I
Yes.
get it. I get
Yes.
it.
Okay.
So
I get it.
the
But I
way
can't
the reason
fault
why Amazon is successful is an indictment of our society, because what we're saying is that
Sure.
consuming has become so important that we're willing to sacrifice people working on the line, pissing into bottles, not having enough time to eat, not having enough time to do anything. We're willing to endure that, to have these people living these lives, so that way I can get my toilet brush delivered tomorrow.
And if you want to
That's-
fix that, stop
Mhm.
buying from Amazon. You won't have that problem.
Which, of course, I don't do. But I am not everyone. And the fact of the matter is that society is built around the idea of consumerism because that is the way that it functions. We have to
You're
have
not wrong.
capitalists. We have to have people buying shit.
But I would
And
point
that's
out
the way that they... What I'm saying is that I would organize society around a different principle.
But I
What?
would point out.
Wait.
No.
What
No.
principle? I got to hear what principle.
No, the principle of consumerism.
Of
No,
compassion.
But
Compassion.
sorry,
Go
I
ahead.
see. I thought you were going to jump in with a different point.
No.
Okay. Part of the reason we've based society around consumerism is because it allows us to focus the competitive nature of mostly men, but humans in general, but mostly men. It's allowed us to have a focus for that competitive nature other than war and conquering. Okay. That is part of the reason capitalism is better than what was before it. Because before it, instead of conquering by making a business that provided some value, at least, maybe it's exploitative, maybe it's not, but at least it provides some value, you would just, if you were the super hyper ambitious alpha dude, you would just try to conquer people. So the benefit is we're having less wars.
Are we?
Yes. Yeah. Statistically, yes. Like that's why there's part of the reason there's so many people.
I'd have
There's
to see the
7
data on
billion
that.
people.
Fair.
No liberal democracy, no capitalist society has ever fought another capitalist society either. Like that's just
World War One
No.
and Two.
They weren't. I'm sorry. You're right. No liberal democracies ever fought another liberal democracy. Okay.
Because it wasn't a liberal democracy under World War One because you had the Tsar,
No.
and it wasn't a liberal democracy in World
Right.
War Two because you had fascist dictator versus
Right.
everybody else in that boat.
But I
So,
think
I think
Josh,
you're being generous.
I think you make some very good points about the drawbacks in our system. Okay. And I just don't think that there's the way to fix that is to work within the system. Because I think if you're right and we throw everything out and try to do something else, it's going to end up being worse. Because human
that's a
history
fear.
shows us it's a big fear. Because
Yeah.
when it's been tried, typically it's been worse. Because the kind of people, when you throw out all the cultural and you try to remake people, that's literally what the Soviets tried, right?
Well, remember,
and Mao.
what I'm
Yeah.
saying isn't to just turn a page
I know.
tomorrow and everybody's communist.
I know.
Yeah.
So
I know.
when we're talking about this, we're talking about a slow progression where we're devaluing consumerism and the idea of exploitation through capitalism. And
Right.
we are trying to incentivize people to have a more compassionate and more community-based sensibility rather than an individual-based competitive system.
And I think that happens, but I think it's cyclical. I think what happens is you get a wave of people who are compassionate and value community more. And then the next generation goes, those guys are fucking pussies. And then the next generation is like, those guys are dicks. We should be more compassionate. So you're just riding that wave.
Or more selfish.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
so
you just,
if you follow the four generations from the fourth turning, you have greatest generation, right? Which lived through the Great Depression, got us through World War II. And then you had the baby boomers, which were all about me, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you have, I don't know if you want to put Xennials and millennials. Or,
no, they're Gen
X and
No.
millennials in the same
No, they're
boat.
totally different.
Okay, so Gen X, and then that's the fall where things start going bad. And then you have millennials who are in their adulthood or midlife.
Check out that book if you get time, Josh, and then I'd love to talk to you about it. Again, it's The Fourth Turning is Here. He points to a lot of evidence that those kind of things are cyclical. Okay,
Mhm.
like and he looks at historical examples where that happens. So if he's right, I don't see how we could end up with a system like yours because everything's going to be in flux constantly because that's how humans just naturally work generation to generation. But I don't know that he's right. If you get a chance to read it, that'd be interesting.
Yeah, I can't really say anything about it right this second just because I haven't read it yet, but I will check it out.
Okay, so it's Neil Howell, and it's The Fourth Turning is Here. He wrote a book in the 90s called The Fourth Turning where he predicted that a new crisis would start about 2010. And if you remember, the 2008 housing crisis is basically what he was predicting. Anyway, it's interesting. Okay, now don't hang up when we stop this, Josh, because it needs to finish uploading so we can talk more. We could talk more after I hit the stop recording button. Everybody that's listening, thanks for listening. You can find Josh's Facebook group. Say it again, Josh.
It's a Facebook page. It's called Nothing is Going to Get Better.
Okay, and you can the Talking Hardcore. There's a Discord channel where it's for hardcore history, but there's a Talking Hardcore page there. If you guys find value in this and you want to add to the conversation, please either go to Josh's page or go to the Discord channel. The link will be in the description for both of these. Right? Go to those pages and let's have a conversation. I think this has been productive. You know, I think I better understand where you're coming from. I hope you better understand where we're coming from.
Yeah, I agree.
And
it's all about dialogue.
Thank you very much for having me on.
Oh,
no, thanks for coming.
Thank you very
if
much
you
for
read
having
that
me.
book, I think we should have you back on after you read that book. So, all right, everybody.
Absolutely,
Thanks for
you got it.
watching.